everybody, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Chris Yee.
And I'm Mike DeLisio.
Today we're taking a look at Shipwrights of the North Sea, Redux. So what this is here is the Garfield Games and Shem Phillips had, at this moment, several trilogies of gaming. Their first trilogy of gaming was the North Sea trilogy, of which the Raiders of the North Sea, by far the most popular in that series. This, I think, was the first game in that series, Shipwrights of the North Sea. And while some people enjoyed it, it's a pile of trash.
I disagree if I could. I'm the biggest Garfield apologist. No, Mike is. But Shipwright's no good.
It was not. It's like almost a take that game in some ways. It was very, very, very lucky. And even Shem Phillips said that in this box. He's like, it just wasn't up to par with other games, so they redesigned it from the ground up. So this is almost a new game. You're building ships. There's not a whole lot of other crossover?
Not really. Yeah, that's the main thing, is that you still have the same objective in the game for sure. And as you said, Shem Phillips, this one always kind of stood out a bit like a sore thumb in the rest of these. And you said several trilogies, Tom. There's really only two. The third one's not finished yet. So let's be accurate when we're talking, about...
Wait, the third one's more than a trilogy?
No, the third one only has two so far. The third one, actually, of that trilogy is going to be crowdfunding soon.
If I had said two, he would have been like, well, actually, the third one was Kickstarted. Yeah, there was no winning on that one. Several trilogies, and there's a fourth one announced, so whatever. Anyhow.
Shall we take a look at how this one plays?
Yeah, Mike, show us how to play this.
All right. All right, here we see a game of Shipwrights of the North Sea Redux all set up. This is a game that's going to be played over 5 rounds, and each round has 5 different phases to it. The first phase of the game is going to be where you are revealing a round card, okay? So these 5 round cards that were placed here came randomly out of a larger deck, and it essentially acts as the game timer. So at the beginning of each round, you flip over this round card. It's going to go right there. And if we take a look at this, everything in this top area only applies in a 1 or 2 player game. Really what you're focusing on here, which are going to be the trade values for that round. So the cost to gain these resources by paying silver is here. And these are going to fluctuate during each round. In this particular round, it looks like 2 silver will get you a stone or a wood, whereas it will take 3 silver to get you a sheep or wool, okay? So first thing you do is you do that. It kind of gives you some information about what it might cost to gain resources during the game. And the second phase is about drafting cards. And depending upon the player count, the way that you draft them will be slightly different. But regardless of player count, at the end of this drafting phase, you will have 6 cards in hand. The meat of the game is where you take actions. And this is the action the phase where everyone's going to be playing simultaneously. They're going to be playing those 6 cards from their hand to their player boards, perhaps discarding them, gaining other resources and potentially cards from that deck right there. And they're going to be, again, all doing this simultaneously on their own. They're going to be spending the resources that they perhaps started with. This is the beginning of the game. You start with 3 workers, 1 of each of the resources, and 2 silver. I should point out that I've got the metal coins here. That is an upgrade. You can purchase them from the website, but essentially it comes with cardboard. All right. So when you are taking your actions, it's going to be from the result of playing cards, and there are different types of cards in the game. I'm going to go quickly through the different types of cards. So first off, we've got these long ships, and this is going to be one of the primary ways you score points in the game. You'll see some points right up there. This is a relatively large one. You can see it has a lot of requirements here on the left-hand side. So one of the first things you might do is put a long ship under construction, meaning that you put it on your board. You will then need to build it by gaining resources and having craftspeople that will allow you to build that ship. once you've done that, you will take it from your in construction area here and you move it to the top of your board. That immediately is going to give you some movement up these progress tracks, and at the end of the game, it's going to give you a certain number of points. All right. So let's say that the purple player had built up a bunch of resources, had played that. They would move up 1 on the military track and 2 on this yellow track, which has a thematic name that I can't think of off the top of my head. You've noticed that all 3 of the players had started on the first spot of one of these progress tracks, and that just comes from the random building, the hut, that every player is dealt at the beginning of the game. You can see for this purple player, they were up 1 on the military track. They just got another boost on that, and then 2 on this yellow track. So those are longships. The other types of cards you have are buildings, and one of the actions you can take is building buildings. The cost is right here. You would need to spend 2 workers and 2 gold, and you would play the buildings at the bottom of your player area. It would immediately give you a bump up a progress track, in this case 2 on the military track. Let me get a little closer for you. It will give you a point at the end of the game, and it also gives you another worker placement spot. So this kind of oval here denotes where you can place one of your workers. In this case, you place a worker to gain another worker and 2 silver, okay? When you're putting a worker on one of these spots, you're not spending it. It's going to come back to you at the end of the round. There are certain situations, like here, you have to actually spend 2 workers, send them back to the supply, so you don't get those back. But when you place a worker here or here, like on your hut, there are also 2 spots on your player board where you can place workers. Once you cover those with cards, you don't have access to them, but that is building a building. Craftspeople here are going to give you some skills that you need to build the longships, okay? And so each craftsperson is going to have a primary craft. Then they also have a minor or a major or minor craft, I think, or skill. For this minor one, you have to pay a silver to have access to it. But again, these are going to be used, you play them on your player board, they're going to be used to help you build these longships where they've got the requirements there in the top left. All right. You can play them on your player board to later spend them discard them to build ships, or you could also tuck them under buildings by paying a gold, to have permanent access to those. So perhaps they'd pay a gold back to the supply, they'd pop this under their fortress, and now, or their hut, and now they've got permanent access to those skills. Up next, we've got townsfolk. You can recruit a townsfolk, and to do that, you are going to get play it to get its one-time ability, 3 silver for 2 gold, or again, you can spend a gold to tuck this under a building, and then you would permanently have that ability. Each building can only have 1 card tucked beneath it, okay? And so in this case, if I tucked that townsfolk, now if I placed a worker on the hut, I can take the primary action here, spending a silver to draw a card, and I can also spend 3 silver to get 2 gold. So permanent upgrades to your building cards. All right. Lastly here, we've got the Jarls, and so they can be tucked under buildings at the cost of 1 gold. And they are always going to give you some end game points, and one time immediately moves up these progress tracks by the amount that are showing here. Okay? They're also very powerful because if you notice, this part of the card shows an X and a resource above it. That is using the discard action. You can always discard a card to get whatever the associated bonus there is. So Jarls are very powerful because they give you a gold. That's really the only kind of card you can discard to get gold. All right. So you would either tuck them under a building by paying a gold and having those points that I showed you as I just dropped it, or you can discard it to get a gold. So all of the cards are going to have some kind of discard ability, even these longships. If you thought there's no way I'm going to be able to build this ship, maybe you got this card in the 4th round or something, or in the last round, you can always discard it to get whatever it tells you there. All right. Main phase of the game, taking these actions by playing cards, getting resources, trading resources, things along those lines, okay? So that is the third and the main phase of the game. In the fourth phase, you're going to be gaining income, all right? So all of these symbols, these kind of moon symbols, are your income. So your starting ship is always going to give every player one worker. So you're always going to get a worker at the beginning of each round, okay? There are other cards that you might get throughout the course of the game that could give you other... Of course, I didn't draw any out there. I'm going to try to see if I can find another card for you that gives you a income. And of course, now I'm struggling to find one. Oh, here's another one. All right, here you would get 2 silver, okay? So the income phase is where you're going to get the benefits of any of those cards that have that symbol there, all right? Finally, you are going to distribute hero cards. And I should mention that you also are going to gain your workers back during the that income phase as well, all right? The ones you haven't spent. Finally, we're going to be having the 5th phase, which is distributing hero cards, all right? And so we've got these different hero cards that are out here on the board, and they're all going to correspond to a particular track. So this hero corresponds to this red track. This hero corresponds to the blue track. You can see that right up there. And this hero corresponds to this bottom track. There are 1 copy of each of those and several copies of this Randy hero card here that is not associated with one of the tracks, okay? When you get access to those cards, they're going to give you some type of ability, and you're going to keep these cards if no one gets higher than you on the associated track. So whoever has access to the highest progress on the military track will have access to this card. If they keep it at the end of the game, it's going to be worth 3 points. All right. And it also is going to give you some particular ability. So if at any point you cross the kind of, I don't know, particular spot, bonus spots, that would probably be the best way to put it, on these progress tracks, you'll gain a worker when you have this hero card in your player area. This hero card is going to allow you, while you have it, to spend 3 silver at any point as a free action to get a gold. All right. And then this player hero card is going to allow you to spend 1 less resource when building a ship. It's not going to give you discounts on the craft symbols, things along those lines, or even workers, because this is specifically talking about resources. It just lets you spend 1 less of your choice to be able to do that, okay? This is also, as you cross these spots, as I mentioned, you're going to get access to these 2 different types of cards here, all right? So here you get a raid benefit or a raid opportunity. And so once you cross these, you're going to get these cards that you can add to the end of your player board there, and they're going to allow you to spend a particular amount of workers based upon where you are on this track to be able to get the benefit that shows at the bottom. So we're here, draw a card and get 3 silver. So if I'm on, let's say this is the purple, we've established this is the purple players. Right now I'm on the 4 spot, got me that card. To be able to raid this, I would need to spend 2 workers. If I was up to 7 on that track, I would have to spend 1. And once I get to 10 and beyond, I don't have to spend any. I can always raid this to get a card and 3 coins. It would flip over, but then at the end of the round, it flips back. These trade cards are going to allow you to either gain an immediate benefit, in this case 3 silver, or tuck this under one of your longships and it gives you another income ability here, another income benefit. All right? So that is what's going to happen at the end of the round. You're going to distribute those hero cards. Then you're going to set up for the next round. You're going to flip over the new card, the new round card, and you'll continue. At the end of the game, you're going to get points in a vast number of ways, from building ships, from having Jarls in your down in your player area, things along those lines. All right, well, that gives you the idea of the game. Let's head back and let you know what we think.
Now, despite everything, I said, that the original game was very simple. I think of all the games in these trilogies, other than maybe Explorers of the North Sea, this is still one of the easier ones to play.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's not too difficult. You draft cards and then you can play them out. The thing that's a little bit difficult in terms of teaching this one and getting new people to play it is the fact that the action phase is so simultaneous. And it's completely free form. You have these 6 cards and whatever number of resources, go.
Yeah, that is true. And also, I feel like because resources are quite tight in this game, that's something that I have found. I'm going to put that right up at front with the teaching. So when I'm teaching new players this game, I'm going to tell them, be aware that this is a game where it's going to be incremental. You're going to feel like you can't do a whole lot at the beginning, and that's because you can't do a whole lot at the beginning. But if you take advantage of what the engine building opportunities are, then you can have more productive turns later on. But I think that can leave a bit of a sour impression with some people because they're wanting to, do a bunch of things right from the beginning.
And you have to go into this, Chris mentioned, the simultaneous thing. For good or for bad, this is very much multiplayer solitaire. Yes, there's drafting at the beginning of each round, and so that means it's not multiplayer solitaire in that regard, right? Because I'll be sitting there and go, Chris, thanks for not giving me the good card. But after that, once you start playing, it actually reminds me of the roll and write they did.
Hadrian's Wall.
Hadrian's Wall.
Very similar thought.
And again, good or bad, I'm not as big of a fan of it, but I don't necessarily dislike it. But my only concern about that is this game has that redo, possible make mistakes problem that these games can easily have. Where I'll sit there and go, I'll discard this card for a resource. I'll spend these resources to do this, and then I'll do this. You know what? Never mind. I can't do that. I'll go back, and it's easy to make a mistake. And since no one's watching you, I don't think anyone's, if you're playing with cheaters, that's a different situation. But I think it's easy to do in this game by accident.
I agree. Yeah, and as you said, it's not unique necessarily to this game. Almost any game where, as Chris mentioned, you're basically given these resources. Now do whatever you want to with them, basically in whatever order you want. That can definitely lead, especially in later rounds when you're doing more, to potentially accidentally doing something incorrect. I just think that's kind of a function of these types of games. Again, I think you're right. You should keep out the cheating element because cheaters are going to cheat no matter what.
Cheaters going to cheat. Mike DeLisio. This game is an interesting one for me, Tom, because I really enjoy card drafting games. One thing I think that this does really well is based on the number of players, you draft the cards differently. And it's funny because my least favorite way of drafting the cards is the 3 to 5 player typical keep one card, pass the others along. I really like the solo mode. You draw 5, keep 2 of them, discard the other 3. Draw 4 cards, keep 2, discard. Draw 3, keep 2, and discard. The 2-player game is a mix between the two. You draw 5 cards, keep 2, pass the cards to the other player, draw a new card. I like the ability to take 2 cards at the same time. So it's funny that in the 3 to 5 player mode is actually my least favorite way of playing this.
I actually think that leads to a flaw, and for me, a flaw I can't overcome. I want to be clear, this game is zounds better than the original Shipwrights, okay? But I still don't like this game. And it's mostly, there's 2 reasons. The multiplayer solitaire is kind of a neutral thing for me. But there's 2 reasons, and one is that it's a really tight game, and you get all these big giant ships, tons of big giant ships, that you can never build. And that, to me, detracts some of the fun from a game. It's like, you could build these. You're going to build 1, maybe. Until you get good, then you can build 2. But where I have a biggest problem with this game is I don't think the cards are equal. And in a drafting game, I'm sorry, the cards that have green borders that give you victory points if you play them, or a gold if you discard them for a resource, are way better than the other cards. On turn 1, buildings are way better than most of the other cards because you can use them throughout the game. And if you get bad drafting, you will not do as well as someone who drafted better. And especially since a lot of the cards in this game let you top deck. And if you top deck a great card, ho, 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 because it's gold and workers. They're amazing. The other 3 resources, they're fine. They're good, and you might need a specific one. But if I'm drafting and I get a big ship that costs 14 different, all these resources for tons of points, and if I discard it, I get a rock, I'm less than enthused.
Curious what Mike you would have to feel about that. Yeah.
Oh, yes. So I can't argue, and I'm not going to try to argue against the idea that, this is a game that, especially situationally, certain cards you can just luck into an amazing card that fits into exactly what you're looking for. And I'm also not going to argue that the Jarls are probably the most powerful card in the game. I don't think that was by accident, though. I do think that those Jarls are meant to be very powerful, because, they can be gold, they can, they're just powerful cards. The issue that I would push back a little bit on with you is about the ships. Because in the first 2 to 3 times I played this game, I went for the strategy of, if I don't build a ship every round, I'm being inefficient and I'm doing terribly. And so I would build the small ships because it is very reasonable to build a small ship every round, okay? Because I've done it. What I found that was when I did that, my scores were significantly lower than when I built my first ship, usually in round 3. Sometimes round 2, but usually round 3. And that's because I used the first 2 rounds as my engine building, right? Where I was setting myself up so that during those last 2 to 3 rounds, I had so much more at my disposal, whether through buildings and things along those lines. And so I think the small ships are generally red herrings. I'm not saying that they're completely useless, but I think that they oftentimes distract your focus from what you should be doing. So I do think that you can build those large ships, but you're not going to do it in the first round by any means, and you're going to have to make that a priority. It's similar in some ways to Raiders of the North Sea, where you're not going to go raiding, or if you do go raiding early, you're generally not going to do as well because you really want to go for those more point-generating raids, and you can only do that by building up your crew, by building up a bit of an engine, resource engine, things along those lines. And so that, maybe as somebody who's played all of the Garfield games, I kind of saw, oh, okay, I see what I probably should be doing here. Also, it shares some lineage with Legacy of You, the solo game that Shem Phillips designed, and he even mentions that this new version was born out of his designing Legacy of You. And so I don't argue your main points. I do think that it's easy to kind of lose track of what a winning strategy is probably likely to be.
And I think that speaks to the feel of the game. The game can feel really uneven if you have a round where you don't get to draft a building, the first round of the game. That feels really bad. And I've seen those people then kind of come back and do pretty well in the game, but it feels uneven. What it reminds me of is a little bit in Raiders of the North Seas. There are some times that a thing would happen or you play a card with that game, had a little bit of take that as well, and you kind of get pulled back and you're like, oh, this doesn't feel balanced. And then by the end of the game, the person who kind of got attacked and stuff was able to pull back ahead. I've played this a lot, and I can't help but, while I enjoy it, feel those moments where, like, everyone got drafted a Jarl card this round but me. Everyone got buildings but me, But then by playing kind of judiciously, like Mike's talking about, you're able to pull off some really cool combos. So it has an odd feel to it, but I enjoy what it's offering. But yeah, I know there's still moments where I'm jealous. Like, I wanted that gold.
I can't speak to the solitaire play because I have not played it solo, but I'm a little curious about it actually, because I think this game almost feels like it was built to be a solo game in a sense.
As Mike said, a lot of the inspirations, a lot of the epiphanies for the design of this came from designing his solo-only campaign game, which I do like that one a little bit better, but that's also, just as a solo game, straight up what it is. I do think the solo mode in this is probably my favorite way to play Shipwrights.
Do you agree, Mike? Is it best solo?
I concur. I like it best solo over a multiplayer version of the game. I think that Legacy of You is orders of magnitude better, but that's for a number of reasons. But yeah, I think that this game probably feels best solo. You really get more of that engine building. You feel a bit more in control of what you're doing. Chris, you mentioned you liked how the solo drafting works. I'm almost 100% sure that Shem used the same system in the solo mode of one of the earlier games in the trilogy. Maybe Architects, I don't remember offhand. But I know I've seen this solo drafting system before, and it's super smart, like you said. But yeah, I think it's best as a solo game, personally.
All right, so take that into account, my rating, because I have not played solo. I've only played multiplayer versions of this. I'm giving it a 5. And I think it's a great production. I think it's way better than the last one, and I think a lot of people like it. This is my own personal take on it. I don't like getting a Jarl card and going, I don't want this, but it's the best card in my hand, I have to take it. Or getting a hand, Mike said about the ships, I get a handful of big ships going, well, I guess I already have a big ship I'm working on. I guess I could take another one, but either way, I'd rather have this card than this card to get another card because it's random. The game I didn't find it to be enjoyable, and the constant depletion of workers is stressful to me because you place workers to do stuff and that's fun, but also you're spending workers to build ships and things. I'm like, this card costs 2 workers. I got to get those 2 workers back. And you get a worker every round, so there's that. But I still just felt like I was always behind. And it's super interesting. It's weird. I want to like this more than I did. I like a lot of the aspects of it. I just wish I could do more and feel less stressed. So take the 5 as a very personal rating. All my ratings are personal, but I'm not saying it's objectively bad. I just didn't like it. Although I do say that I think it's objectively bad to have imbalanced cards in a drafting game. I think, if there's no way to mitigate that. But whatever.
Yeah, that's interesting. I get what you mean by it feels very tight. There's been multiple rounds where I've ended the round and be like, ooh, and I have all of this stuff and I can build that ship. I'm short 1 resource, or I'm short 1 card or something. And I go, okay, can I fiddle around anything and do some clever conversion? No, I'm just going to be short 1 thing. All that being said, I'm giving this game a 7.5. And primarily because I have played this solo a lot. And playing it 2-player, it kind of having that multiplayer, but sort of using that solo draft type of a thing, which also I think that you could, and there's nothing stopping you, right? You play your games your way. You could just do the solo draft even with 3 people at the table.
I thought about that. You would go through the deck fast, but I thought that would be interesting. That would be worth trying.
Yeah, because I think it's kind of the best way to approach it. I really love being able to pluck 2 cards that work together, because my biggest complaint about this is there's a lot of those ship-making symbol types. There's a lot of resources, and the 3 basic resources feel so interchangeable, right? Gold and the workers feel so different. Played this with Wendy the other night, and she was like, those 3 other resource types could have just been like one thing almost,
Except you're always missing the one you need, but yes.
That being said, there is some flaws to it, but I have a lot of fun. And this is one I do anticipate playing more solo because I want to, can I max out 1 track? I haven't done that yet, but I'm going to at some point. It has enough to entice me to come back to it.
Well, I don't think I want to include my feelings on the solo game with this because, I tend to separate those 2 things. I think it's better as a solo game, but the game as is, I'm giving it a 7. I think that it is good. And first thing, kind of to echo what I think one or both of you have said, I'm glad this game exists because the first Shipwrights was always almost like out of the conversation, right? It was like, here's really the Garfield games. We don't talk about Shipwrights. And now you can do that. You can include Shipwrights in this. It's my least favorite of all of them, but it's still one that I could recommend. I think it's a solid design, but I think that it's going to be less, I think it's going to excite less people than other games in these lines of games. You mentioned the solo drafting. I don't think you'd go through the deck any quicker. You would just take whatever cards you didn't choose and shuffle them back into the deck. I mean, everyone's still going to end up with the same number of cards. What I think it would do, and this just depends on your play style, is Tom mentioned that it's mostly multiplayer solitaire. If you do it that way, it's 100% multiplayer solitaire, because the only real interaction you're going to get is going to be potentially having an opportunity to hate draft other people, because you can see what they're going for. You know, you can see, oh, they need a craftsman, I'm going to take this craftsman. You know, that kind of a thing. But otherwise, yeah, it's an interesting idea, Chris. I think you could do that, and then maybe you would feel like you have more control over your game, but then it's basically 4 separate games at the table, and let's see who did best with those cards that they got. So anyway, a 7 for me, still one I recommend, but and I'm glad it exists, because it definitely feels like it's part of this line now. But it's definitely not going to be the first that I'm going to pull off the shelf if I'm looking to play a Garfield game.
Well, there you go, folks. That's Shipwrights of the North Sea Redux. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Chris Yee.
I'm Mike DeLisio.
Have fun sailing or looting or whatever they're doing.